Thank you. Appreciate the chairman and ranking member for this series of hearings on high drug prices. Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to thank you for sharing your personal story and the organizing you've done to elevate the voices of others who have similar experiences. Throughout this hearing series, I have been sharing stories of Wisconsinites who have shared their experiences with me, including Diane, who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at 28 years of age and has been on a medication for 23 years, but she and her husband sadly decided this past January that she would stop taking it when it reached $90,000 a year. Greg, who has two young adult sons with type 1 diabetes and have seen the insulin and test strips required go up and up and up, and now it's about $1,000 a month in his family. This seems to be absolutely rampant, and you were just mentioning an individual who tried to get an explanation for why there was a sudden increase in the price of a medication he relied on. Patients and taxpayers, and frankly, policymakers get far too little information. You've shared a number of the stories that you've collected with us. I want to have you share with us why it's critical to require transparency, particularly for drug list prices, retail prices, especially surrounding the companies, say, R&D costs, advertising costs, costs on or expenditures on stock buybacks or executive pay. Why is this vital, and what information do you think needs to be out there that currently isn't?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I would start by saying we're not dealing with flat-screen televisions here. I have nothing against flat-screen televisions, but these are life-saving drugs. And when we are consuming 20% of our Medicare budget on drugs, and we are spending 18% of our healthcare or our GDP on healthcare, I don't know how individuals, employers, or you all who make the laws to take care of these matters can make intelligent decisions without transparency at any level. And in markets function with transparency. In the absence of transparency, bad things happen. It's one of the reasons we feel it's so important to get transparency inside PBMs. We don't know what's going on there. We don't know how much of the rebates they're putting in their pocket or how much is going to the insurer, if any of it is making its way to patients. And so we believe the transparency up and down, starting with the setting of the retail price and the justification for it, is so important, and especially if the drug is invented using taxpayer money, and 50% of all major new breakthrough drugs are invented with money from the NIH or paid by the federal government to academic medical centers.
Thank you. Mr. Augustine, I was sharing with the committee the last hearing we had of, I think, our first in this series, where we had people in different parts of the system, and it seemed like there was just a ton of finger pointing. You know, oh, it's their fault that the price is going up. No, it's theirs. And when asked directly about the starting point, the drug list price, we couldn't even get straight answers. You know, it's still pointing to the other players in a very complex system. You've already answered questions by saying, well, it's complex, or it's hard to figure out without the data. So I would ask you to, your report also states, and I quote, list price matters because it is the starting point for all negotiations in the supply chain. I couldn't agree more. Can you elaborate on how the lack of transparency perpetuates the blame game, the finger pointing, and why your report specifically recommends that Congress require pharmaceutical companies to publicly disclose list prices, price increases and other details like profits.
And if you could do that succinctly, that would be helpful, because she's out of time.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, clearly the issue of blaming each other, which takes place a good deal in this arena, is made possible by the lack of transparency. And if we're to fix the problems, we've got to understand what the problems are. And there's some insight been gained by outsiders making assumptions, but the fact is that we don't know with great confidence where the money is going. And there are reasons why some parts of the enterprise should make more money than others, but frankly, we just don't know adequately. We've made our recommendations on the best data we can find.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin.